Chapter 9. The tingling sensation of the fruit's juice gradually faded, my senses returning to what passed for normal in this strange, isolated chamber. Silence reigned, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. The air hung heavy with anticipation, thick with the lingering sweetness of the fruit and the earthy scent of damp stone. For what felt like an eternity, the elders and I locked eyes. Their gazes bore into me, intense and scrutinizing. Deep furrows etched their brows as they watched, waiting to see if I would succumb to any adverse effects. The firelight danced across their weathered faces, casting deep shadows that made their expressions even harder to read. In truth, I noticed little difference from my first experience with the fruit. A familiar warmth spread through my body, soothing the aches and pains from days of captivity. The dull headache that had been my constant companion, born of hunger and stress, melted away. Even my mind felt clearer, sharper, as if a fog had lifted. As the moments stretched on, I found my attention drawn to the young translator. She stood slightly apart from the others, her posture tense, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Unlike the new people, with their golden skin and pointed ears, she was an anomaly. Her appearance bore an uncanny resemblance to my mother, or rather, she shared features I had come to associate with my mother's unknown heritage. The translator's silver hair cascaded down her back, catching the firelight and seeming to glow with an inner radiance. Her fair skin, unblemished by the harsh realities of the wasteland, stood in stark contrast to my own honey-brown complexion. But it was her eyes that truly captivated me, a shade of purple so vivid it seemed almost unreal, like twilight made flesh. The silence was finally broken by the eldest of the council. His voice, gravelly with age, flowed like water over stones as he spoke in their melodious language.
Tail fruita, hais nota, harmayed hima. Perhaps hisa wordsa ara truai.
The young woman's head snapped up, her eyes widening slightly. When she translated, her voice carried a note of surprise that mirrored my own feelings.
The fruit has not harmed him. Perhaps his words are true.
The chamber erupted into a flurry of whispered conversations. The elders began to deliberate among themselves, their voices low but animated. I caught snippets of their discussion, words that sounded tantalizingly familiar yet remained just beyond my comprehension. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited, acutely aware of how much hinged on their decision. The cool stone beneath me contrasted sharply with the warmth still flowing through my veins from the fruit. Every sense seemed heightened. I could hear the rustle of robes as the elders shifted, smell the faint musk of their sweat mingling with the smoke from the fire. Finally, they seemed to reach a consensus. The bearded elder in the center, his silver hair gleaming in the firelight, turned to address me directly. His words flowed with the same musical cadence I was beginning to associate with their language, but the meaning remained a mystery. I turned expectantly to the translator, noting the way her slender fingers twisted together as she listened. She nodded, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear before speaking.
The elders are satisfied with the truthfulness of your words, as it seems you are truly unharmed and can consume the fruit from the sacred tree. However, there is still the matter to be decided of what to do with you. You have found our village, and to let you go could be a danger to us, considering that you clearly come from a people that are able to endure and survive the purification.
As she finished speaking, I could feel the weight of the elders' gazes upon me once more. The air in the chamber seemed to grow thicker, charged with the gravity of the moment. I knew that my next words would be crucial in determining my fate. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, I bowed deeply once more. The cool stone pressed against my forehead, grounding me in the moment. The scent of damp earth filled my nostrils, mingling with the lingering sweetness of the fruit. When I spoke, I chose my words carefully, aware that my future hung in the balance.
Honorable elders, I understand your concerns. Since my mother was killed by the authorities of my old settlement, I fled into the wilderness to escape capture. I had been wandering the wastelands, surviving on my own, before deciding to return here. I hope to explore this area more thoroughly and possibly find answers about my mother and my own heritage.
I paused, lifting my head slightly to watch the translator. Her melodic voice filled the chamber as she spoke in their language, her hands moving gracefully to emphasize certain words.
Honorable Elires, he understands a Yura concerns. Since hisa modera was killed by the authorities of hisa olda settlement, He fled into a thy wilderness to escapee capturai. He had a been wandering the West Islands, surviving on his own, before deciding to return a here. He hoped to explore this area more thoroughly and possibly find answers about his mother and his own heritage.
Taking a deep breath, the musty air of the chamber filling my lungs, I continued,
I have no place to go, nor am I headed anywhere in particular. If you are willing, I would like to ask for asylum. I'm still very much ignorant about many things, and I can see that your people are wise and noble. Knowing much about our world, I feel there is much I can learn and benefit from if you can teach me your ways. At the very least, it should help me avoid insulting or committing sacrilege towards you or any of your kind in the future if I understand the proper way to interact with you.
As the translator relayed my words, I noticed a change in her demeanor. Her eyes widened slightly, and her voice took on a curious lilt, particularly when speaking about my unique background and lack of knowledge about my origins. The elders listened intently, their weathered faces impassive in the flickering firelight. The chamber fell silent once more as the elders deliberated. I could hear the soft rustle of their robes as they leaned in close to one another, their whispered words too low for me to catch. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing into the air. Sweat beaded on my forehead, both from the heat and the tension of the moment. After what felt like an eternity, the central elder spoke again. His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder, the strange words flowing with an authority that needed no translation. I turned to the translator, noting the slight upturn of her lips as she listened. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of approval.
The elders are amenable to this arrangement and compliment you on your wisdom for recognizing your ignorance. They are willing to remedy this illness of the mind, as you seem to be someone of particular interest, one who can survive and consume the fruit as you do. They feel there may be lessons they can also learn from you. You will teach each other.
Relief washed over me, though I knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with as many uncertainties as the wasteland I had left behind. The tension in my muscles began to ease, and I realized how exhausted I truly was. The bearded elder made a gesture and 2 guards stepped forward from the shadows. Their golden skins seemed to glow in the firelight, a stark contrast to the dark leather of their armor. As they approached, I could hear the soft clink of metal, perhaps hidden weapons or charms woven into their clothing. The translator's voice softened as she added,
They will escort you to your new quarters. Rest now. Your lessons begin tomorrow.
With the decision made, the elders called for the guards. My bindings were cut, the ropes falling away to reveal raw, chafed skin beneath. The sudden freedom sent pins and needles through my arms and legs, a reminder of how long I'd been restrained. 2 guards flanked me, their golden skin seeming to glow in the strange ambient light of the chamber. We walked through winding passages, the living architecture of vines and roots, intertwining with remnants of the old world. The air grew cooler as we moved deeper into the complex, carrying a damp, earthy scent mixed with something alien and sweet. Our footsteps echoed off the walls, a rhythmic sound punctuated by the occasional drip of water from unseen sources. Eventually, we arrived at what appeared to be a partially collapsed warehouse. Its cavernous interior was dimly lit by the same bioluminescent plants I had seen throughout the settlement. The soft blue-green glow cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the space seem larger and more mysterious than it probably was. The guards gestured for me to sit and wait. I complied, sinking down onto a makeshift bench fashioned from salvaged materials. The cool surface beneath me was a stark reminder of how far I was from the world I had known. The metal creaked slightly under my weight, the sound amplified in the quiet space. As I waited, I took in my surroundings. The warehouse was a study in contrasts, crumbling concrete and rusted metal juxtaposed with thriving alien plant life. It was as if nature itself was reclaiming the ruins of the old world, guided by the hand of the new people. Vines as thick as my arms snaked up the walls, their leaves pulsing with a faint inner light. In one corner, a cluster of mushrooms glowed softly, their caps an otherworldly shade of purple. The air here was different from the council chamber. It carried the musty scent of decay, but also something fresher, like the air after a rainstorm, but with an unfamiliar twist. I could taste something metallic on my tongue, perhaps residual radiation or some byproduct of the strange flora. After what felt like hours but was likely only about 30 minutes, a familiar figure approached. The young translator walked towards us, her footsteps almost silent on the debris-strewn floor. She spoke briefly to the guards in their melodious language, her voice carrying easily in the large space. The guards nodded and stepped back, apparently dismissed from their duties. For a long moment, she simply looked at me, her iridescent purple eyes seeming to peer into my very soul. The strange light of the chamber made her silver hair shimmer, creating an almost halo-like effect around her head. Her fair skin stood out starkly against the shadowy backdrop of the warehouse. Then, without a word, she sat down across from me. The bench creaked slightly as she settled her weight. It was only then that I noticed the native-made satchel on her back. The bag was crafted from some kind of leather I didn't recognize, dyed a deep green and adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. The silence between us was palpable, filled with unasked questions and unspoken truths. I could feel the weight of her gaze, assessing me just as I was assessing her. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere was aware of the significance of this moment. The translator reached into her satchel, the leather creaking softly as she opened it. She produced what looked like strips of animal jerky, the meat dark and glistening in the dim light. The scent that wafted from the dried meat was unfamiliar but not unpleasant, a mix of smokiness and something herbal I couldn't quite place. She also offered me a water skin, made from an animal hide I didn't recognize, its surface smooth and slightly iridescent.
Drink slowly,
she advised, her voice softer now that we were alone. The gentle lilt of her accent was more noticeable in the quiet of the warehouse.
Those who drink too quickly after being starved often throw back up their food.
I nodded gratefully, taking her advice. The water skin felt cool against my palms as I raised it to my lips. The water was clean and refreshing, a stark contrast to the irradiated puddles I had sometimes been forced to drink from in the wasteland. It tasted faintly of minerals, but lacked the metallic tang I'd grown accustomed to. The jerky was tough but flavorful, unlike anything I had tasted before. It had a spicy kick that lingered on my tongue, warming me from the inside. As we ate in silence, I studied her more closely. Her silver hair was tied back in a ponytail, similar to the other new people females I had seen in the camp. A few stray strands framed her face, catching the bioluminescent light and seeming to glow. Her garments, made of a fabric I didn't recognize, seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light. The material looked soft yet durable, its color a deep blue that reminded me of the night sky. The curiosity between us was almost palpable, filling the air with an electric tension. I could see the questions burning in her eyes, the purple irises seeming to swirl with unspoken thoughts. Her gaze mirrored my own desperate need for answers, a hunger that rivaled my physical one. It was only a matter of time before one of us gave in to that curiosity. Finally, she spoke, breaking the silence that had stretched between us.
The elders have assigned me the task of teaching you our language so you can properly communicate and talk as one who is seen.
I tilted my head, intrigued by the term. The jerky spice still tingled on my tongue as I asked,
Are you someone who is seen?
I assumed the word was their way of describing someone civilized or recognized as one of their own. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The expression softened her features, making her look younger, more approachable.
I am,
she confirmed, her voice carrying a hint of pride. Emboldened by her openness, I asked the question that had been nagging at me since I first saw her.
How is it that you're among these people when you're clearly not related to them?
Her expression grew somber, the smile fading from her lips. She took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling with the motion. When she began to speak, her voice was quieter, as if she was sharing a secret.
I was captured around the age of 10 from my settlement, a place connected to Bunker 17 research laboratories.
She paused, her eyes distant as if looking into the past.
They explained that after breeding enough specimens, they were able to reach the next stage of development by establishing one of the first settlements inhabiting a red zone.
The implications of her words hung heavy in the air between us. I could feel my heart rate quicken as pieces of a larger puzzle began to fall into place. Her story was painting a picture that began to illuminate the greater world, and likely my mother's origins as well. The warehouse around us seemed to fade into the background as I focused entirely on her words, hungry for more information. My mind raced with implications as I formulated my next question. The cool metal of the bench beneath me seemed to ground me in reality as I grappled with the weight of these revelations.
Are there more like you who can survive and resist the purification of the red zones?
I asked, deliberately using their term for radiation. The words felt strange on my tongue, a mix of the familiar and the alien. She nodded, her eyes distant as if recalling memories. The bioluminescent light cast shadows across her face, accentuating the faraway look in her purple eyes.
Yes,
She confirmed, her voice soft but clear in the quiet warehouse.
I came from a settlement of 50. The overseer was an old worlder who had to wear heavy protection and live in a specialized dome to survive, along with his security force of about 5 soldiers. But the rest of us were all born in the breeding labs. Most of us were female. Only 10% of our number were actually male.
I absorbed this information, feeling as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. Yet so many questions remained, each answer spawning a dozen more. The air around us seemed to thicken with the weight of unspoken truths. I chose my next words carefully, my voice barely above a whisper.
Have any of you ever been known to escape the facility? Would you know anything about that?
She considered my question for a long moment before answering. Her fingers idly traced patterns on the surface of her water skin, the movement almost hypnotic in the dim light.
I can't be completely sure as I wasn't someone privy to such information.
She began hesitantly.
But the only subject I know of that actually escaped was over 20 years ago, a female known as Prime Specimen 2415. She was designated as the first of the Prime series, as her genetic makeup was very unique. She had far above average genetic resistance to radiation and had an absorption rate of over 80%, as well as other heightened traits that none of the other specimens had.
She paused, her gaze sharpening as it focused back on me. The intensity in her eyes made me feel as if she was looking right through me, seeing something I couldn't.
Now that I've answered a few of your questions, I believe that has earned me some goodwill. So please, answer a few of mine. You said in the chamber that you didn't know where you were from. Is that because you have no memory of this, or is it because you simply do not know?
I answered honestly, the truth leaving a bitter taste in my mouth.
My mother always kept her past secret. She told me it would be dangerous for me to know anything about it. She died before revealing anything of real significance to me.
The translator leaned forward, her eyes intent. The movement brought her closer, and I could smell the faint, sweet scent that seemed to cling to all the new people.
What was your mother's appearance like?
She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I described my mother, confirming what I suspected was her hunch.
She very much had the look of you and your people, I would assume. Her hair was the same, as well as her eye color and fair skin.
As I finished speaking, I realized we had been talking for some time without properly introducing ourselves. The absurdity of it struck me suddenly, a moment of normalcy in this surreal situation.
I'm sorry,
I said.
but in my settlement, it's usually customary to begin acquaintanceships by exchanging names. My name is Darius. May I please know what I should call you?
She blushed slightly, a faint pink tinging her pale cheeks.
My name is Celia of the Elite Series, Elite Specimen 3701.
She said.
My series was originally named to be a supporting series to the Prime series, but that never came to pass because the Prime series had to be discontinued after the escape of 2415 Priscilla.
At the mention of that name, I froze, my water skin slipping from suddenly numb fingers. It clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. The implications of what she had just said crashed over me like a wave, threatening to drown me in a sea of revelations and new questions.